You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, and thanks so much for coming back again to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This is, believe it or not, episode number 150, and it's somehow appropriate given the few days of stellar hiking we've had. It's been such an extraordinary week with some amazing photographs, and there are going to be no interviews this week. This is just how awesome this hiking has been as we took on this Virginia Triple Crown. The Virginia Triple Crown is Dragon's Tooth, which is just before you get to the turn off to Four Pines Hostel, Joe Mitchell's Four Pines Hostel. Then after that, there is McAfee Knob, the iconic place for your photo, and the one you really want. And we decided as a group to do this, get out there at dawn so we could see the rising sun. And some of you have seen the pictures already. They are just fantastic. And not to be forgotten, there's Tinker Cliffs. Tinker Cliffs is the third in this little group of three in the Triple Crown. And once more, they are just amazing to see and to be up there and spend that time, especially with certainly the people I've been with on this trip, but other people as well. At various stages, we've seen 10 or 15 people at all these spots, and it's been utterly glorious. But before we get on to all of that, let's hear from our sponsor, Sawyer.
When I hit the trail in 2014, I soon discovered that I come with the wrong water filter. Everybody else had a Sawyer squeeze. Eventually I bought a squeeze and I loved it. I'm going again this year, and top of my list of things to buy was the new micro squeeze filter by Sawyer. Like all Sawyer stuff, it just works. You can filter up to 100,000 gallons, and their full-size squeeze filter comes with a lifetime warranty. Last year, believe it or not, more than 4 million people got clean water through a Sawyer water filter. But if you think that Sawyer is just about water filters, you could not be more wrong. Nope, they supply everything to protect you, both in the backcountry and the backyard. Protect your gear and clothes as I did with their permethrin fabric treatment, which is 100% odorless after drying. With all the ticks and bugs around, this is an absolute must. They also provide sunscreens and first aid products. Find out more by visiting Sawyer.com.
Thanks, guys. You know how much that means to me, and I really appreciate the support you've given the show. And I think it's helped us keep the show quality at a level which most people are happy with. So let's get to it then. This is going to be day number 65, and I've got to tell you, I've been with my tramily for over a week now, and I've absolutely loved sharing these days with them. And as I say, other people that I met at the same time. But when you're in a little group and you're hiking together and you really want to get to these places together, there's something added to it that, you know, I think seeing somewhere like McAfee Knob or McAfee Knob and looking out over that sunrise and not sharing it with somebody with whom you've spent some time would be kind of sad, really. So we were delighted, I think, all of us, to be going up there together and enjoying these beautiful sights together. So let's get on with it. This is day number 65. Day number 65. Need a shelter, mile 687.2 to VA 620, mile 696.1, just 8.9 miles. At Need a Shelter, which was kind of it was quite a nice open space. Wasn't a great deal of good tent sites, funnily enough, but I found a half reasonable one, and Trigger was there, and Cushy and Ugg were, Trigger was in his tent, and Cushy and Ugg were in their hammocks, and another younger guy came to join us as well. There were 4 or 5 people sleeping in the shelter. And that night, it was a very, very warm night. So I slept with my vestibule doors open. And so all I had between me and the outside was the bug net. And I know it's not terribly brave, but I found it really very freeing because you're lying there and you've got, as it gets darker, you can see the outlines of trees, and then you can't see the outlines of trees, and you're out there lying there just under effectively. It feels like you're just lying underneath the top. So you can see so much. And I found it incredibly freeing. I really did. And it's about as close as cowboy camping as I ever want to experience, though. For those of you who don't know, cowboy camping is where you simply put either your AirPad down or just sleep straight on the grass or wherever or rock or wherever you're going to sleep in your sleeping bag and just looking up at the stars, I guess. And I don't want to do that ever because I think I must be a bit of a wuss when it comes to that. But yeah, that's it was rather nice though, and I really enjoyed it with a little breeze coming through. An absolutely beautiful night. The reason we did such a short day, and it was basically up and over a hill, was to hike to the house of a guy called Doug Buchanan. And Doug had reached out to me. He and his friend Jason, who lives next door, are listeners to the show, and asked if I would like to come and stay with him in his house, and if I want and be fed and do laundry and stuff, and if I wanted to bring any tramley that I was with. Well, my tramley, as I've said, is UGG, Cushy Life and Trigger, and so he said, "Yeah, fine, bring them along. It'd be great." So we decided to all accept that, and so it was going to be kind of a short hike. But of course, as always, it starts with a really testing uphill, and then there's a kind of a gentle sort of downhill before quite a sharp descent near the end. But in the middle of that, there's the Audie Murphy Monument. I don't know how much you know about Audie. I mentioned it in the last show. He was an American hero, the most decorated American soldier, and he died in a plane crash very near where the site is in 1971. And he meant a lot to me because of my father and I used to watch his movies and used to love that. So, and I thought to myself, because I'm going to be a guest in someone's house, I didn't really want then to be doing a podcast while I'm there. It would take away from, make me seem rude, obviously. And I needed to get a podcast out because I hadn't done one for a few days. So I sat down at Audie's monument and I recorded it. So there was something very, very visceral about being there and something that meant so much to me and recording my show and all those things. And things make you, I don't know, make you certain times and certain places really resonate with you. And that place did to me last time, and it did to me this time as well. So I was recording the show and I started talking about an incident that had happened with Trigger, one of the guys I'm traveling with. And believe it or not, and I just started to talk about it. I said, well, let's Trigger tell you himself. And he had literally walked up to the monument as I was saying that. So I stopped that recording. I asked him if he'd mind if I would record him, if I could record him rather. And he said, yeah, sure, that's okay. And as you could hear, he got quite emotional about the water bladder he'd left behind. And so many emotions heighten on this trip. I've said it about myself as well, but in Trigger's case, he'd met this woman, I think it was a cousin of Cushy Life, and she'd given him this bladder, and it meant a lot to him that she'd given it to him. So it was important to him. But I carried on. I finished my show and then carried on down this kind of wide pathway down to the bottom. And as we got to the bottom, we met Jason, who was Doug's friend at the bottom. Jason's got Jason's chair in the river, where he simply sits down with his feet in the water and I guess fishes. He's kind of a relaxed guy, very articulate guy, and got a lot of big ideas for the future of his property. So he took us back to Doug Buchanan's, which was, I don't know, 100 yards maybe off the trail, with it's a lovely house in the woods. It's got a gazebo. It's got about 200 feet of river running past it. And as Jason lives next door, he's got about 200 feet of river as well. And it's an absolutely beautiful spot. They hit the spot straight away by offering us beers, which we gratefully accepted and really enjoyed that. The house Doug actually wasn't there when we got there because he was actually closing on the property that day. But when he got back, he joined us with beers and showed us around the place. And Jason is a truly magnificent cook. We had a feast for dinner. I'm not going to go over everything. It was collard greens, but there was beautiful beans, and there was cornbread, and there was just vegetables, potatoes, and great food. And next morning, and because we wanted to go early, he said, well, I'll do your breakfast. So he did us a great breakfast, and that was spectacular as well. And if these guys ever wanted to turn it into a hostel, then they would certainly have the right location and plenty of the elements to be successful. So you never know. Maybe they will or maybe they won't, but they've certainly got some great plans for the place, and I wish them well. And you know what? I thank them so much for being such generous hosts to us, because we knew in the next 2 days after that, we were then set up with the food we'd had for some tremendous hiking, and as I said before, Virginia's Triple Crown. But that was the end of day number 65. Day 66, VA 620, which is mile 696.1, to Catawba Mountain Shelter, mile 711.9 and 1.5 miles short of McAfee Knob, and that's 15.8 miles. This was one of my strongest days on the trail so far. I don't know, there's something, because the guys gave us great breakfast in the morning, so I had plenty of calories in me, I had plenty of water in me, and we knew we were going up Dragon's Tooth. So we were all kind of excited by that. And we all knew also that we were going to be stopping somewhat short of McAfee Knob later on, so there was more excitement about that as well. There was a climb, but it was about 1,500 feet, but it was in about 5 miles, so it wasn't too bad, but it was kind of rocky and pretty damn spectacular. And I always got this impression last time, when you're walking along, you're on the trail, you're on the path, and then suddenly you see a little white blaze on a rock, and it leads you up and over those rocks, and you clamber through rocks, and it does take a toll on your boots. And I'm going to be changing my boots in a couple of days' time, in fact. So that was something that I know I've been doing damage to my boots and probably to my feet as well at the same time. When you get there, I said to the other guys, they were saying, well, we're nearly there yet. I said, yeah, we're there. But I said, you'll know it when you see it, trust me. And you get to the top of the mountain, and you can't see Dragon's Tooth. And the Appalachian Trail turns then down the mountain, but you go on a blue blaze down to the Dragon's Tooth. And Dragon's Tooth is a monolith on Cove Mountain. It just begs you to climb it. It's just sticking up like a tooth, literally. I was too exhausted last time to climb it, but this time I went for it. And I scrambled my way up there. You know, I put my pack and my poles down and scrambled my way up, hand over hand climbing, which I don't know whether, if any of you read my books, you'll know I loved the hand over hand stuff. It's like being a kid again. And indeed, there were several younger hikers at the top, and all of us came up there. Trigger came up, and Arg and Cushy Life, and we just sat there chatting with everybody and just gasping at the views. And it was just a magic moment. I often say on these places, there are so few people. There's just us looking at what we can see right now, and no one else in the world can see it like we can. And we're so privileged to be up there. The weather had been great for a few days, and it was predicted to be great again tomorrow till the afternoon. So we were hopefully going to get over McAfee Knob and get to Tinker Cliffs and do the Virginia Triple Crown, all in decent weather. And as it turned out, we kind of did. We eventually headed down, and the climb down from Dragon's Tooth was something I wasn't looking forward to at all. And more I thought about it, I really struggled with it last time. But I think then, remember, I'd been bitten by the dog 3 or 4 days previously. My leg was getting worse and worse. I was exhausted because getting to Dragon's Tooth that day, I'd done a longer climb than I had on this particular day. So I can understand why I was worried about it. And it was difficult on the way down, but it wasn't quite as bad as I remembered. And, you know, we all got down, no problem at all. You get to the bottom, I think it's VA 624, and you got the options. You can go right to Joe Mitchell's hostel, Four Pines. We weren't going to be stopping there because we really wanted to be up McAfee Knob at dawn the following day, and I was kind of regretted not even just popping in and seeing Joe and saying hi. But the other option was to turn left, which to I think it's a grocery store at a gas station, only about 0.3 miles off the trail, and I was the only one who took that option. So I went down there. I thought I'd lost them for the rest of the day, lost the other guys for the rest of the day. When I got there, there were 3 or 4, 5, 6 hikers there. We sat around chatting. I had 3 litres of water and some Gatorade, so I really, really did need some water. And I didn't have quite enough food for the next couple of days, so I stocked up on a few bits of food. So that was good. And I really felt energized by actually the water more than the food, actually. And I went back to that turn-off where I'd been when I got down the mountain to VA 624 and headed back towards the Catawba Mountain Shelter. And very, very quickly, I met up with Cushy and Ugg. They were at a river filling with water. And we'd actually met up with a friend of Cushy's called Robin, or Forget-Me-Not. And she was now hiking with us for these 2 days. I mean, talk about friend she must be. Cushy had planned for us to hike this 15 or 16 mile day, and then the next day to hike 18 miles and do something we hadn't done before, which was get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So Robin gamely battled on. She just actually she just actually run the Boston Marathon recently. So we knew she was fit, but she kept up with it really well, more than really well. In fact, she seemed to be stronger than any of us. And so I joined up with Cushy and Ugg and Robin, filling up with water. And then so there was another climb, and then it was relatively flat. And when I say it's relatively flat, it means it just doesn't go up for 2 or 3 miles at a time. It means it goes up for 400 or 500 yards, 300 or 400 yards, and then goes down 300 or 400 yards, then goes up 300 or 400 yards. So you're always on a climb one way or the other, either up or down. And then eventually there is a climb up to the shelter, which wasn't going to be too bad. And none of it was a problem in terms of elevation at that time. And as the day went on, we started to see clouds forming, and we heard thunder all around us for probably about an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, and thinking we are going to get soaked in a minute. And I just haven't, as you know, been able to cope terribly well with rain. At the road before the last climb, we heard there was trail magic. So I'd actually caught up with Trigger by then. I was hiking really well for me, and he's a fast hiker. He's the same age as me, 2 months younger actually. But we really, when we heard there's trail magic, we hammered it down there, and we got there. And I'm so sorry I don't remember their names, but there's a previous through hiker and his partner, and she had hiked from that road in Virginia all the way to Katahdin, I think last year or the year before. And then I think later this year, she's going to hike south from that same spot. It was lovely to meet them. They had beers, they had pizza, they had donuts. I mean, really, what else does a hiker want? Beers, pizza and donuts. And they actually had some cantaloupe as well. And then we headed up the hill with these dark clouds threatening, and it did start to rain about a mile short of the Catawba Mountain Shelter. But it soon stopped. I actually quickly put my backpack cover on and really hammered it up there and got to the shelter, and I thought, well, it's going to rain in a minute. So I set up in the shelter. But then it didn't rain. It got sunny again, and so I decided to set up my tent. So I set up my tent, and there were a bunch of people there, many of whom we knew already. And it was just this great feeling that the next day we were going to be going up to McAfee Knob. But in fact, we did consider going up for sunset, but we did change our minds because it had been quite a long day. So we hung out. One of the guys there was playing guitar and singing. That was nice. Had a bit of food. A couple of guys had fire. It was just a wonderful atmosphere in the woods, getting ready for the next day. So that's the end of day number 66. Day 67, Catawba Mountain Shelter, mile 711.9 to Daleville, mile 729.7, a 17.8 mile day. Because we were so determined to get a view of McAfee Knob at sunrise, we set a 4 a.m. alarm. Actually, as mine went off, obviously, I was actually right next to Ugg. His went off as well in his hammock. We all got out. It's very disorienting. It's incredibly dark in the forest. I put my headlamp on, and we said we'd set out at 5 a.m. At 5:01, I think it was 5:02, we were all gathered. I said, well, I'll lead the way. I'll be the silk buster, which means that I'm going to walk into all the cobwebs in the morning, go first. I immediately went the wrong way. I mean, absolutely instantly. How anybody does this night hiking, I just have no idea at all. So in the end, it was Ugg who went ahead, and I think it may have been Cushy as well sometimes. And we started making progress. And I guess because it's a day hike, it wasn't a difficult hike up there. It was uphill, obviously. I don't know how many hundreds of feet, but it was uphill. But it only took us about 40 minutes to get there, about a mile and a half, I think it was. So we were quite happy with that. And when we got there, of course, it was still dark, but just starting to see some light in the sky. And there were two hikers cowboy camping on the actual rock, which wasn't going to be helpful for us because we wanted our pictures. So we were sitting there we didn't disturb them. We talked to them, but we just let it go because I knew when we wanted our photos, we were going to have to ask if they would move. So it was left to me to ask them if they'd move, and they obviously did, which was very, very nice of them, obviously. They shouldn't have been there, by the way, but because you're not allowed to camp up there. But a bunch of people were camping in or around the place, so it is what it is. So we started taking pictures before the sun came up because there's one traditional rock from which you take your pictures, which shows then the McAfee Knob, where you're literally sitting there with your feet over what looks like 1,000-foot fall. It's nothing like 1,000 foot, but it looks like it is. So we were taking our pictures from there before the sun came up, and then as the sun hit came above the mountains, we took pictures as well, and they worked out just as good as well. I say there were plenty of people up there at the time, but we all vacated that iconic spot to allow each person his or her chance for solo pictures, which was very good. And then there were group pictures, and this really was a special, special moment. I saw it before, and it was in the middle of the day where I saw it. To see it at daybreak, as many of you know, I'm not a religious person, but I said to Trigger, if I was ever to be a religious person, this right here would give me pause to think about it. It was a truly, truly magical place. We had coffee and then some breakfast. Well, some of us had breakfast. I just had a breakfast biscuit and Snickers before heading on. We wanted to get to Daleville for the rest of the day, so we knew it was going to be quite a long day. But of course, we started so early, so we had a pretty good start. And we also knew that Tinker Cliffs was another, the third part of the Triple Crown, and we wanted to make sure we got there and spent enough time there to get some good pictures there as well. And it was another quite dramatic drop down from McAfee Knob, and then another big climb up with plenty of false summits. Kept thinking we were at the top, and we just weren't, and another mountain appeared in front of us. But I'll tell you what, it was totally worth it when we got there. When I got there, we were just standing out, gawping once again at the views from these rocky outcrops. And we could see across the valley to McAfee Knob where we'd been, and it fills you with wonder every time to see how far you've travelled and how far you've gone in a couple of hours. It was about a 5-mile hike, but it was down the mountain, then up and along a ridge again, and it was just beautiful. And I bumped into, of all people, Fancy Pants. I really miss that guy. He's so funny. He was with his buddy, Twin. He of the red beard, and the two of them are just having just a blast on the trail. They really are. And I think Tinker Cliffs are perhaps underrated when compared with the other two sites, but to me they are equally spectacular. Don't ever miss out the chance to see Tinker Cliffs as well. So we took loads more pictures, and then there was lots of excited chatter, and then we had a last 11-mile hike into Daleville. And I kind of lost my mojo after that. The excitement of the hiking of the day was fabulous, but to then be going 11-mile hike to Daleville, I knew it wasn't going to be a lot of fun, and I just lost my mojo a bit. We stopped at Lambert's Meadow Shelter for a snack and water top-up before then going on. And it was a slog, frankly, the rest of the day, probably because I got so excited with everything else. And, of course, it started to pour with rain about half a mile from Daleville, which was a bit of a drag. Now, Robin, Forget-Me-Not, had her car about a quarter of a mile from where the trail hit the road. And there was me, Cushy, and Robin. We knew the trigger had gone on ahead of us, and Cushy texted him, and he was actually at the outdoor retailer store, in the trail store, near where Robin's car was parked, so that was helpful. We said we'd come to you, and Ugg came out soon after, so we were all together again, and we'd already decided to go for the 3 piggies barbecue because we weren't 5 piggies at the time, and we were going to break up for a couple of days because I'm going to, I stayed in Troutdale last night, and I'm meeting up with Becca and Derek Quinn, and if you remember, Ellie later today. They were, Ellie was the baby who was carried with her parents on the trail a couple of years ago now. She's 3 years old, and I'm looking forward to meeting up with them later and staying the night with them. The others went to Roanoke, and I've just had a text from them saying they're staying because of the weather tomorrow as well, which is Sunday. I'm recording this on Saturday on a 0 day, and I'm probably going to have a 0 tomorrow as well, but we'll see how that goes. But I tell you what, that is the end of day 67, and it's been spectacular. I just want to say one more thing. I am constantly aware of how lucky I am to have the chance to put a hold on my life to do this. I've got pictures that are going to last me a lifetime. However, nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever replace the pictures burned on my retina that I hope will stay with me forever. But it isn't only the pictures, it's the moments like Pony Keg, one of the very, very many extraordinary young men and women who hugs everybody he meets. It's a young guy, General Lee, a handsome young man who smiles at absolutely one and all and brightens their day. These guys are just experiencing their life, and they're living it to the utmost. Don't just experience this through me and my pictures, though. Get out there, grab a pack, and try to get up to McAfee Knob at sunrise or sunset. Feel it yourself. It will never, ever leave you. I'll see you next week.